He is a friend. An article in the Epoch Times by Joseph Hanneman. Judge's latest refusal to grant bail looms large for January 6th defendant maced twice by D.C. jail guard. You know, having been a felony judge in Texas, handling I don't know how many thousands of felony cases, nobody gets more incensed than I do when judges abuse their position. I recall having a bailiff. I found out that during recesses, he was trash-mouthing, talking terrible to people that I was sentencing. And when I found out, I called him in and said, look, I'm sentencing these people to prison. We are supposed to show the example of civility. When you trash talk somebody when they come into court, it builds up hatred and anger, and they seethe during the time they're in prison, and it makes them more likely to come back and recidivate. You know, there's no reason to do that. We're going to treat them civilly and fairly and make sure they're not abused, not verbally, not physically. And yet I see federal judges who seem to have the attitude that, gee, I am confirmed for life, so once I'm confirmed, I will do as I please and as I think I can get away with on appeal, and it's outrageous. So I'm encouraging my friends on the Judiciary Committee that there is such abuse by federal judges. There is such abuse by the DOJ and by the FBI adopting Gestapo tactics. They didn't used to act like that. I've had so many FBI agents tell me, you remember how it was in the 80s and 90s. We didn't go break down doors of people we knew would show up voluntarily if we just told them when and where. We didn't do it in the middle of the night to scare families and drag them out in their underwear and alert the news media so they'd be there to humiliate them. And yet, it's been going on. And people say January 6th and think that justifies the worst criminality by the Department of Justice and even federal judges. Because I do believe it is a breach of a federal judge's oath when they ignore due process requirements. And they take the position, I'm not going to do anything about somebody that's being abused in jail until I'm told to by an appellate court. So I'm hoping that the Judiciary Committee will even be subpoenaing judges to find out, not belabor specific cases, but to find out what their judicial philosophy is that allows them to avoid due process and to allow prisoners to be punished in pretrial confinement against the constitutional rights they have. What allows and provokes a federal judge to act like a dictator in their courtroom? Here's an example. I would not know U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan if he was here in the room, but I have read and heard firsthand from people who have had to deal with some of the injustice of him. And I know the federal judge that refused to recuse himself so he could sentence Dr. Simone Gold, even though he dated her and she wouldn't date him anymore. So he looked forward to abusing his position to sentence her as the first woman with no criminal record and only guilty of a misdemeanor trespass, he got to sentence the girl that quit going out with him, the woman, the brilliant lawyer and MD, to a maximum security facility down in Miami. He needs to come in and answer about recusal and who he thinks he is above the law that's in the law, that a judge must recuse himself or herself if there's even an indication there might be some impartiality there. We got a lot of cleaning up in the federal system to do, and I am glad that Republicans will be able to do that. The article points out, despite audio and video evidence showing former Tennessee Sheriff's Deputy Ronald Colton McAbee did not assault a police officer on the Capitol steps of January 6, as alleged by prosecutors, a federal judge again refused the defendant's motion to be released from the District of Columbia jail pending trial. The issue took on added urgency on September 5th when McAbee, 28, was twice assaulted with chemical spray by a guard in the District of Columbia jail for not wearing a COVID mask. His wife, Sarah, told the Epoch Times, "This is just inhumane," Sarah McAbee said. "Doesn't even matter what your political beliefs are. You should never treat somebody that way. Are we living in the same universe? This is not the America I once knew." McAbee is charged by federal prosecutors with 7 January 6 related crimes: assaulting, resisting, or impeding a federal officer, 2 counts of civil disorder, entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, disorderly or disruptive conduct in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, engaging in physical violence in a restricted building or grounds with a deadly or dangerous weapon, and committing an act of physical violence in the Capitol grounds or building. And that sounds horrible. But then when you find out that actually, if you listen to the audio as you watch the video, you find out he was helping a Capitol policeman who was down. And yet this judge has the audacity to say, we're not listening to the audio, so he could hear that evidence. Why wouldn't you listen to the evidence as well as watch a video that gives a false impression? Why? And then to chastise this guy and punish him even more because he was law enforcement. He should have known better than to assault a police officer, but he wasn't. Well, the judge doesn't want the facts to get in the way. He's too busy being a tyrant and punishing January 6 defendants while they're in pretrial and punishing them with pretrial. People need to answer for the tyranny of our justice system as it's become. And I have no problem, and I didn't as a judge, punishing people who deserve the punishment. And there were people January 6th that deserved to be punished. But it sounds like that corruption continues to grow in the DOJ, the FBI, and even in our judicial courts, federal courts. Tragic. He'd been pepper sprayed in the jail twice and was not allowed to clean it all off. It's a threat to his health. In a 31-page, oh, and by the way, this sat in front of the judge, the request for bail, 117 days. Now, in our state courts, we make sure somebody has a hearing We used to. I'm sure they still do within 48 hours. And if they had other evidence to bring in, we'd set a hearing and have that. But this judge had this matter sitting in front of him for 117 days while the prisoner was being abused in the D.C. jail, where there was a deputy warden that had tweeted out, "F the supporters of Trump." Well, she made sure what she tweeted was what was being done at the jail.